Christian Lindmeier, hi, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me.
So you see in the WHO the strategies of the different countries in the world in order to deal with the coronavirus. Which one of the strategies proved itself as the most effective one?
So this is a difficult question because every country has its own specific scenario and its own specific risk scenario. And it also depends a lot whether the country has wide community spreading. That means lots of cases spreading to each other inside the country, or whether there's only a few dozen or 100 cases. There are many countries in the world which still have set up a few cases only. But what has always proven most effective is this aggressive strategy of testing and tracing every single suspected case, isolating cases which are infected, treating them, of course, and following up with contact. That strategy all over the world has been proven most effective. Those countries who have been doing this since the very early stage, and since the beginning, were able to keep the curves lower than others, or at least were able to keep the deaths lower.
So if we're talking, for example, about Sweden, about Britain, and about USA, for example, what can you tell us about their strategies?
Again, it's difficult to compare country by country directly because this is a bit like apples and pears. It depends on where the virus entered, in which setting it entered, whether it was a mass spreading in the beginning, and then it depends a lot on the capacity of the health system also. But again, the overall system shows that the earlier you were ready to respond, the earlier that the population was ready to keep physical distancing and do the hand washing hygiene, but avoid larger crowds, avoid larger settings, or be careful when you go to a shopping center as long as it was still open, or to go to any public event or public place. That proved most effectively. The availability of tests is a huge part of this, and the availability of capacity of hospital beds, of healthcare staff, of people who do the tracing. All this needs to be in place, and not every country had the same. Sweden looks like it's a very effective measure right now. Other countries are not that great, but again, we have to be careful to see what every new day brings, and it's too early to draw a big blanket conclusion.
Are you supporting getting back to normal life in those countries?
Normalizing is something which we all crave for. And I'm also doing this from my home office, so I'm in the same position where I wouldn't mind leaving a bit more normal life. Yes, but it's very important that whatever countries start doing the normalization or easing the lockdown, that they do this in steps. First of all, the same sentence is true again. It's important to look at every single place in its own, to do a risk assessment, maybe of every single city. And a city might be different than a countryside because mass transport is something which is a risk factor. So do individual steps, but be aware that the health system has to be ready, just as the cases have gone down now in these countries, to cope with a possible new influx of cases. So you need to have capacity in the health system. You need to have a population that is aware that this is not like water coming out of a faucet. The moment you turn it off, it stops running. That's not how it is with coronavirus. We still have cases, even if curves are flattening. That doesn't mean we have no cases anymore. It just means that the rise in cases is slowing down or is flattening. So we still need to be cautious, and the population has to be ready for this. The whole administration has to be ready for this. Shops, magazines, anything which you open up has to be in a position to cope with this. Enterprises may need screening of their employees, maybe temperature scanners. So these are individual strategies that every country, every city, every region needs to have before they start opening up, and then do it gradually, monitor what the results are, if there's any change in pattern, and then gradually continue.
Yes. Professor Cohen here with me in the studio, who would like to ask you a question.
Yes, hi. Thank you for your for talking with us. I have a quick question, actually. What's your take about new treatments? We are all gambling on, I would say, collective immunity or herd immunity and also vaccines, which are being developed. But do you see any preventive or either prophylactic and therapeutic treatments that could help in kind of mitigating what we're seeing right now?
So let's start with the vaccines. The vaccines are still something which are a long way away from us. There are promising candidates. Some, I think, like 3 vaccines are in human trials already by now. But still, this doesn't mean that we have a vaccine and it's ready for everybody. Let's not forget this. First of all, we need to have a vaccine that is effective and doesn't have side effects and treats in the right, or prevents in the right way. Then it needs to be licensed and it needs to be produced in a way that everybody on this earth can have it. So it's not enough to have a vaccine only for a few thousand people. You need it in the billions, and that's a huge challenge. And there needs to be a strategy how to roll it out across the world so there are no disparities. On the treatment, it's similar. There are many promising treatments available right now, not available on the market, but in the testing phase. So there's a lot going on, but we still need all of this to be licensed. There are a lot of rumors about effective treatments. Some of them are really rumors, like maybe an infodemic, like false alarms. And there are some which look promising, but they also still need testing. If you're talking about the home remedies, these are normally things that are good for your personal feelings. So if you feel sick, if you feel anxious, and you do something to yourself which makes you feel good, that's always a good thing. But it hasn't proven effective to lower the risk or to lower any risk of infection or to treat.
Christian, Professor Cohen mentioned the herd immunity. Can it help stop the coronavirus?
Unfortunately, I didn't hear you right now. I had loud music.
I'll repeat my question. Professor Cohen mentioned the herd immunity. So can it help stop the spreading of the coronavirus?
Yeah, herd immunity is something which is difficult to achieve, and it's not something you should aim for. Meaning, you should not try to expose a population to infection so that you then can achieve at some point herd immunity, because this would exactly be what we're trying to prevent, that masses of people get infected, that the health system is blocked up. But in order to reach herd immunity, you need a good 80-90% of the population having been infected and having that immunity. Right now, we're looking at percentages of the populations of 3, 4, 5, 6%, which are affected or infected, and that is way, way, way away from herd immunity. So herd immunity, to achieve herd immunity would be the wrong step now, trying to achieve it, but the time we will have it is also many, many months away still. So I think actually we will have vaccines before we will have natural herd.
Interesting. So let's talk about antibody tests, serological tests, maybe the next step of fighting and dealing with the coronavirus. Where are we at this issue?
So I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing you, because always when you talk, I get loud music on my ear.
Okay, so the serological, the antibody tests. We know that some countries buy a lot of those tests. Can it help us to prevent the coronavirus? Christian, can you hear us?
So the antibody testing is a much better way to test whether there is antibodies against the virus in your system, whether you do have resistance against the virus. But we don't know yet which amount of antibodies, so it's a bit inconclusive. So just the test that shows that you do have antibodies does not necessarily prove or tell you that you're resistant. This is a big difference, and this makes this whole procedure a bit skeptical. That's why possibly we also have seen people who have had antibodies but yet have been falling sick again. So it's a difficult scenario. You need those tests, and you need also to have a large amount of it, and have also when you test, when you see the antibodies, you know that there has been an infection, but it doesn't tell you yet that this person would be clear of any further infection. So it has to be taken prudently.
Okay, important point. So are we expecting maybe, Christian, for more serious outbreak of coronavirus in the next few months, in the next winter?
So the seasonality of this virus is something which is still a big question mark. Is it something which comes only in the winter? But that would mean we wouldn't have any outbreak right now in the south of the globe. So it may be this is really something which, as it is a new virus, everybody is trying to study and trying to find out. What we will see, though, we see right now already a shift of pattern of the virus moving a bit. So the central part of Europe, for example, has been largely affected over the last months. There, the curves are flattening. Now the center shifts a bit to the east of Europe and the southeast of Europe. We see African countries starting to be affected. In the Americas, we also see Southern American countries being affected. So it is, unfortunately, now the more one country is doing, you see an uptick in other countries. So that is why globally we still will see many more cases, and we're far from a global. Individual countries may be at different steps, but globally we still have the worst to come.
So maybe one last question. Are you recommending in the WHO to close borders for maybe even a year?
So border closures and traveler trade restrictions is something we have been very careful with the recommendations, because there are various factors to it. First of all, the virus moves all over, and the virus is already in many countries. It would be much more effective to do a really stringent and effective entry and or exit controls at border stations. This way it gives you a control. This way you can see who's coming in, who's infected, where these people then could be quarantined or isolated, where these contacts are. So that would be, but this needs a lot of tests, it needs capacity, it needs training of staff, and it needs to be the will to do it. That would be much more effective. Let's not forget, nowadays also we have a problem because of many of these border closures that even help doesn't reach countries. Production of medical equipment, of protective equipment doesn't get from country A to country B because of these travel and trade restrictions. So the problematic with any travel and trade restriction is always, or border closures for that matter, is always that it has to be weighed against the harm it does. So when you do this risk evaluation as a country, you need to see, does it do more good than more harm? Then you may want to do it. But again, as a general recommendation, we recommend against it.
Okay, so Christian, let's talk about the education system. We saw in Denmark, they opened their education system, the schools. We're talking in Israel about this issue, whether to open or not. What is your point of view?
So getting children back to school would be a very, very important point as soon as possible. But the possible is the big word here. And of course, the whole world is right now looking at Denmark and watching to see how their experiment nearly is going. It would be a good step if it's possible. And then, of course, it also needs the careful measures of hand hygiene, of possible distancing, how this is being implemented in Denmark and how this plays out. Very, very important step. It also depends on the amount of infected in your population. So again, it's not something you can blanket-wise recommend. It has to be carefully weighed in each specific country, each specific scenario. But it is a good thing if it works.
Okay, so we should look at Denmark and follow them. Thank you so much, Christian Lindmeier, for this interview. Thank you.